Catus, Maximus here, this time with a review of the ThruNite TN12 Pro. This is actually a sponsored video. I appreciate ThruNite helping me out like that. I've definitely reviewed a lot of their flashlights. The thing about this light is this is one of their kind of smaller, more compact lights, but it's been improved. It used to be 1100 lumens, now it's been up to 1900 lumens. And it's not quite as bright as some of their other 18650 lights, but it does last a little bit longer, and the balance of 1900 lumens in turbo mode gives you the option of having it on turbo for, according to their manual, 7.5 minutes. So 7.5 minutes on turbo, and then it'll drop down to medium high for another couple hours. And so it gives you a compromise where it just isn't getting as hot quite as fast. ThruNite does use protected cells. It is a 3400 milliamp hour, so pretty decent there. I do like ThruNite's build quality. I like that they clean up the threads. There isn't any kind of grittiness or anything like that with the threads. Anyway, wow, that thing is, they have a little plastic warning. When they ship them with the cap a little bit loosened so that the battery doesn't want to discharge. I did charge this up, and what I did find is that it will charge at 10 watts. So still, from an absolutely empty battery, will take a couple of hours. That's really still not too bad. And one thing I should also show in here is it does use a regular battery. But what's interesting how they have the side switch and the tail switch is this has this secondary sleeve. So there's actually 3 contact points: the body of the flashlight, that ring, and of course the spring. And yes, they are gold plated. Actually, they even gold plate the tip of the battery. And it is indeed a spring at the other end too, so it shouldn't have any issues flickering or anything like that. Of course, water resistant. Besides that, tempered glass lens. One thing that I find interesting is the fact that the tail switch takes you directly to turbo, where the regular button just takes you to whatever mode you had it last, and as soon as you turn it on, it'll cycle 3 modes, so low, medium, and then turbo, and then back down the low. If you press and hold when it's in the off position, you get this firefighting mode. If you press and hold again, then it actually does a lockout, and that lockout does both the tail cap as well as the button. And I find that a little bit curious, since it is a 3-contact flashlight, that you would think you could lock out the button, because that's what's going to get accidentally pressed pretty easily. But still allow the tail switch to work, since that's a big, heavy mechanical switch with a bunch of protection around it. As far as everything else that you get in the box, it's the usual. We do have a belt clip here. In this flashlight, many of them can go on either side. This one we can see the undercuts only on one side. It is pretty stout, and you can orient it towards the button or away from the button, depending on your preference, to help reduce the risk of you accidentally pressing it if you don't have it in the locked out mode. It is a double direction, so you can go in this way or you can go in this way. Definitely a pretty stiff steel spring in that. We should mention it is USB-C. I will show that the port, pretty easy to access, but they've done a pretty good job designing this with a little tab. Kind of sits down in this recess so that it doesn't get caught up too easily, but it is a very tight USB port. What I mean is that there isn't a ton of clearance. It's not a very big body on the flashlight, but there's still not a ton of clearance, and so if you're using an aftermarket cable, you may have trouble with it fitting. And I did want to mention that. Otherwise, it's not too bad. The little grommet is nicely sized, fits in there pretty nice, and of course the cable that it comes with works just fine. And of course a manual and a little particle of plastic there. It comes with one of their more premium lanyards. This is one of those filled ones. I see my cat has decided to come and pay a visit. Nothing too exciting here, Tiny. It's just a flashlight. Padded lanyard. I do like this feature, so when you put this on your wrist, it reduces the likelihood of it falling off. I got to dig up a couple of rings. We do have 2 spare O-rings. I should mention that as well. One thing is, even though they actually did a pretty decent job deburring that, there is no sharp edges, at least on the outside. Hard to feel on the inside. But if you really carry around a flashlight with a lanyard, and these lanyards are all the same with like cameras and these flashlights, over time the hard aluminum will wear through the little loop, so I do recommend putting on keychain rings. So I'll end up doing that. That pretty much goes over what we got in the kit. Let's go outside and see how it performs. I almost forgot to mention that it does indeed come with another little silicone button protector, but once again, as I mentioned in many other ThruNites, you got to get a special little two-prong, usually like a snap ring pliers with some pretty big tips in them, to unscrew this little collar in order to replace it. But it is nice that they at least include that. And I should mention that it does include a nice little belt pack. Has a ring for it to hang off of a backpack or anything, and then a standard belt loop. Anyway, so there's our firefly mode. You can barely make it out on this camera. And then there's low, medium, high. And what I find interesting is that actually I think the full turbo is only accessible via the tail cap. Now if we do that again at a distance, that's low, you can't really even see it. Medium, you can just kind of barely pick out those trees, which are about, I don't know, just can pick out that tree. That one's about 50 meters away or so. But then if we put it on turbo, you can see how it's much brighter, and then you can see the trees that are 80 meters away. So it is obvious. So it's low, medium, and high. And then turbo actually is just accessible through the tail cap, which I find interesting. And if you click it a bunch, then you get your strobe, which also appears to be full turbo mode. But once again, low, come on now. You got to press and hold it. There's high. High is obviously much less than the full turbo mode. So we'll just do a little bit of walking here. We can see that it definitely is a pretty well focused spotlight. Now, it will last hours and hours on this mode. It's rated for 2.5 hours on high. So that would be this level of brightness here. It will last 2.5 hours, which really isn't too bad. It really is a focused little spotlight. As far as walking around, I think you get something like 8 hours or more. Easily could stay on all night if you're stuck with just using this flashlight. So anyway, that's the brightness modes. It really does have a lot of throw, but you can see not a lot of splash at all. Well, that's kind of the purpose. It's a little pocket turbo spotlight. I did want to correct myself. If you just double click, then it goes straight into turbo from the side button. When you use the tail cap switch, it only does turbo, but I want to do a little field. So this is a little field test. So this is on low, and then medium, which is pretty far. It's kind of hard to see the perspective, but it's, I mean, probably 30 meters, you're seeing pretty good. Then there's high. Gets you about 40, 45 meters. And then turbo is just really, really bright. Even the flood's actually pretty bright in turbo just because how many lumens. Although I'll have to say it does heat up pretty quickly. So, not a lot else to say. Kind of like the aspect of this, although this is, I guess the point of this is to provide a balance between some of the really bright 18650 lights. They have like some 2500 lumen ones and some 21700 battery based units that are 3000, more than 3000 lumens. So this is striking a balance of power, weight, and size. Do like the texturing. Wish they would have put another groove there just so it'd be just a bit more grippy. And I didn't even notice earlier, not only does it come with the switch button, it does come with the replacement cover for the port, which is pretty standard for premium lights. So this thing retails at Amazon for 50 bucks. You can check out the link in the description. ThruNites are pretty expensive, but you get a 2-year warranty, and if you register with them, they'll give you an extra 3rd year. So that's a pretty good warranty. That includes the battery. So if you have any issues, they will swap it out, which is something to be said. And using, you know, premium elements, all, you know, of course all metal, including the button, the tempered glass lens, I think it's overall a pretty decent light. I think the one suggestion I'd give them is that since it is a multi-contact, or it has the extra sleeve inside there, that you should be able once again to have the button locked out, but still just be able to use the tail switch to turn it on and off. But I do like that they do have a lockout, so it's not going to show up dead or anything like that. And definitely has some pretty good throw for a little flashlight. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing, and I appreciate ThruNite sponsoring this video. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.